உலகெங்கும் தமிழரின் பிம்பம் உங்கள் டிவி.
Welcome to CrossRoads on TVI, a show that showcases the Tamil Canadian community, their issues and their successes. I'm your host, Manjula Salvaraja. On our show today, we will speak to guests from the South Asian Autism Awareness Center about their work and the substantial rise in rates of autism cases. After, we'll speak to an ambitious young man about his dreams of going to space. We would like to invite you to call us and share your thoughts on anything you hear. Give us a ring at 416-623-8100. We would love to hear from you. Before we introduce our guest, I wanted to share this video by SAC about a family with a child who has autism.
எங்களோட ஃபேமிலி வந்து ஒரு அழகான ஃபேமிலி. 3 செல்வங்கள். அதில் 3வது தான் எனது இளைய மகன் ரெனோஜன் எவி என்று அழைப்பார்கள். அவருடைய இயல்பான வாழ்க்கை நாளும் பொழுதுமாக போய்கொண்டிருந்தது. எங்களுக்கு ஒரு திடுக்கிடும் ஒரு தகவல் 3 வயதில் தான் தெரிந்தது, இவர் கதைக்க முடியாமல் இருக்கிறது என்று சொல்லி. பிஹேவியர் மாறினது, ஒட்டுமொத்தமாக மாறிட்டார் பிஹேவியர். கத்துறது, குளறது, கட்டி பிடிக்கிறது, நட்டிக்கிறது, இப்படி டென்ஷனாக என்னாலே அவரை கண்ட்ரோல் பண்ணல. அந்த செக்கிங்லாம் தெரியும் இவருக்கு சிவியர் ஆட்டிசம் என்று சொல்லி இருக்கிறார்கள்.
This is a pig, and a pig says, wow, and this is a duck, and the duck says, amazing, good job.
ஒரு வருஷத்துக்கு பின்பு தான் நாங்கள் வந்து இந்த சவுத் ஏசியாவில் ஜாயின் பண்ணினாங்க. இன்றைய வரை அவையின் மூலம் இதுகளை நாங்கள் பெற்றுவிட்டோம். அதை சொல்ல முடியாது, என்னால் சொல்ல முடிகிற அளவுக்கு அப்படி ஒரு இம்ப்ரூவ் என்ற பிள்ளை கிடைச்சிருக்கிறது. இப்போது ஏபிஏ தெரப்பி, பீச் தெரப்பி, இன்னும் என்னென்ன தெரப்பிகள் கொடுக்கலுமோ அவர்கள் கொடுப்பார்கள். அதற்கு இப்போ ஒரு நிரந்தரமான இடம் எங்களுக்கு கொண்டு தேவை. அந்த முயற்சியில் நாங்கள் இன்றைக்கு பேரண்ட்ஸ் முழு பேரும் ஒத்துழைக்க வந்திருக்கிறோம். இப்போ இன்னும் ஒரு குறைபாடு இருக்குது. என்னென்னு சொன்னால் எங்களோட பேரண்ட்ஸில் வந்து முக்கால்வாசி பேருக்கு தரோவாக இங்கிலீஷ் தெரியாது, ஓரளவுக்கு தான் தெரியும். அப்போ அதால் சில விஷயங்களை நாங்கள் தமிழில் அறிய முற்படுறோம். பேரண்ட்ஸ் ஒன்று சேர்ந்ததால் இன்றைக்கு எங்களுக்கு ஒரு சிறு ஒரு 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 உற்சாகம் வந்திருக்குன்னு சொன்னால் பிள்ளைக்கு ஏதாவது ஒரு வழியில் ஒரு முயற்சி கிடைக்கும். அதை வச்சு நாங்கள் எங்களோட பிள்ளைகளை முன்னுக்கு கொண்டு வரலாம்னு நினைக்கிறோம். இன்றைக்கு எவ்வளோ மாறி இருக்கு. அதுக்கு காரணம் சவுத் ஏசியன் தான் சாட். அதுக்கு எந்தவித மாறுதலும் செல்ல முடியாது. என்னுடைய பேர் ரவிமோகன், என்னுடைய மகன் பேர் ரெனோஜன் ஏவி. நாங்கள் ஒரு சாட் குடும்பம்.
Let's meet our guest. Niran Cooney started volunteering with children with intellectual and physical disabilities when he was 16. He has a degree in psychology and has worked with a range of populations with special mental health needs. He has been the program director at SAC for over 2.5 years.
Yeah, that's right.
Dr. Shivajan Sivapalan is a family physician with a practice in Bowmanville, Ontario, beautiful town.
Gorgeous.
He is the vice president of the board of directors of SAC and has been volunteering with them for 3 years. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming in. I know the weather's been kind of this weekend, so I know this is a trek for all of our guests. So, let me start off with you. We've had the pleasure of having SAC on the show before on CrossRoads, but there's a lot of new things that are happening at SAC. Perhaps you can tell our audience about that.
Sure. I think the biggest news that we finally have a home. We finally have a center that we can organize a lot of information that we need to be organized. That the parents can have one central location to come to. We have volunteers who are constantly being trained at this new location as well. So having a home was a huge obstacle that we're trying to achieve for the past 2 years, and it's a huge accomplishment. We're very happy about that.
Where is it physically located?
It's located in Markham and Ellesmere, and it's 1970 Ellesmere Road. We're still in the beginning stages, but again, it's very
It's a huge,
massive,
Yeah.
So we're very, very proud of that.
Now I know that you've I've heard mentioned that you also have new programs out as well.
Right, we do focus on accommodating a lot of the demographics that we have within our organization. So we see a very wide range of people coming in. So we have as young as 2, as old as 31, and we really need to make sure that we're changing the programs to make sure we accommodate those students who come in. We're finding different ways to help these students through finances. So we're launching different jewelry lines and clothing lines. The clothing line is called You Ought to Know. So the t-shirts are just designed by designers, and it looks great, very hip, very contemporary styles. And then the jewelry line as well. It's made by some of the students actually at SAC. And we're selling jewelry to just the malls, anyone who's interested to buy any bracelets or necklaces.
And how would they, like if they were interested, could they go to your website?
The website, yep,
and your website is?
Yes, sac.org.
Okay.
And that's SAAAC. There's a lot of A's, but there's 3 A's and it's .org. And then we're also trying to make sure we're catering to the older guys, and I think we're going to talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a question about because that is an issue of interest to us at CrossRoads.
Right.
So we may as well get this out of the way because this question will come to us after the show.
Yeah.
You have your big annual gala that's happening March. Tell us about that.
It's happening March 9th. It's happening at the Scarborough Convention Center. And last year it was amazing. We had about 1,200 people, coming out, and it was just incredible to see, how many people were so committed to helping, the families at SAC. And what was great about last year's reception or what have you, was the parents coming out and telling their stories. The kids were coming out, getting awards. So we really want to.
I remember that moment actually. There was quite a few. Tears in people's eyes because you actually had the parents come up and then the children, and there was a dad that actually read a story of his experience on stage.
And this goes against the stigma, right? Like I think before a lot of parents were quite afraid of sharing the experiences with everyone. But now that they're like on the center stage and being looked at, by 1,200 people, they're more than happy to share their story and their struggles and what have you. So we're very happy to showcase that again this year. So
how can people get tickets to this?
Again, the website is probably the best way, sac.org, and all the information is up
Saturday, March 9th.
Saturday, March 9th.
I'll remind everyone about it because we're going to talk about so much more in the middle.
Right.
So let's talk about a question that I actually have put to a couple of you before. It's just to understand funding. So, walk us through, Shiv, you're a family physician, so you know how funding works in Ontario. Walk us through what it takes to the costs associated with helping a child that has autism if you were to do or give them all the treatment that they needed.
So this is actually interesting because I don't know if anyone's read the Toronto Star. They just had an article out there that was talking exactly about this. When you look at it, for most of these families, they're already financially burdened, and most of them are single income. And then they have to look at providing ABA therapy, which is the mainstay therapy. They have to provide speech therapy. And some of them want to do some of these alternative therapies, such as music and dance. If you look at the cost for that, when you look at ABA, you're looking at $60 to $80 an hour.
And what does ABA stand
for?
So
ABA stands for Applied Behavioral Analysis. Okay. And that's the mainstay therapy. That's what's been studied, and that seems to be the most effective.
Okay.
Now, and when you look at speech therapy per hour, it's almost like $110 to $120 per hour. And the number of hours you need to get some sort of improvement, the minimum amount of hours is typically 20 hours a week. So when you break this down, and what the Star quoted was, it looks like it's almost $60,000 per child per year.
Now that's a tremendous amount of, a family can't shoulder that.
Exactly. That alone is typically more than what most people make on a yearly basis. So what we did at SAC is we came up with this volunteer model that offsets some of the costs. It does not offset all the costs. And we cannot provide the same amount of hours that would be. Ideally, we'd love to, right? But when you look at that, and with the number of children we're seeing, we see about 100 families, 100 different kids. The cost can range up to about $6 million if we're going with that $60,000 quote. Even with the offset cost, we're looking at a minimum of $1 million per year to fund all of those services and get every child everything that they need. Now, we can meet some of those costs through these private gala events that we have. Like our gala events are our primary fundraising event, and we hope to raise, hopefully, close to $150,000, maybe $200,000 if we're lucky, right? But again, that's what, 1/5 of what we need. Right.
Now, so and again, if it comes back to you have this gala, you raise this money, but I'm just kind of doing the math. I think that you provide probably 1/3 of the $60,000 of services through a combination of stuff you have to pay for and volunteer resources.
Exactly.
But if you do the math and then you talk about the space, you talk about paying for people, I mean, you've got to have a really, your budget is probably close to $1 million. You cannot be raising all of that just off of a gala.
No.
So where does it come from?
So some of it comes through grants, and we
Okay.
apply. And for example, we've got grants through United Way, we've got grants through Trillium, and recently we got a grant through TELUS, right? But again, not enough. And these are grants that are limited. There's a time frame for them, right? We're still applying for as many grants as we can, right? And we're still looking for individuals. So over our next 8 months or so, before the end of the year, we're still looking for individuals, private sponsors, and we're still looking for sponsors for a gala that's coming up, right? And we look to our community. This is where we really need our community support, because ideally, yeah, the $1 million mark is a mark that's going to be hard to reach, but it's not impossible. And we're fully invested in this. And Neera and me and the rest of the board, we're going to put as much effort as we can, but we need the help of the community. Right? And that's the message that we want to get out there.
So it looks to me that it is going to take sort of private donations,
Exactly.
private sponsors to help you bridge that gap. I mean, if anyone's listening and they're interested, how do they reach out to you guys?
So one option is our website, right? And on our website, they can do direct donations, or they can even join our membership plan, right? There's a lot of information on there. And the benefit for any private donors or sponsors is now we're a registered charity. So there is a tax incentive too, right?
Okay.
Not only are you helping change families.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay.
So there's added benefits and incentives. And obviously there's also, you can call, and which is great. Our CEO, she's always on call 24/7. And so if they want to make direct donations that are larger amounts, they can call her directly at 416-824-8847. And that's
Did you just
Geeta.
give out her phone?
I
on this?
just did, and she specifically wanted me to. So
Oh,
I'm
really?
okay with that. I've asked her and made sure it was okay.
You get into trouble, not Mr. Cooney or myself. It's all yours. So I'm going to take this to a different angle that I'm interested in. I'm trying to find, so this is this Toronto Star article that came out, I think it came out this week, and there's been a lot of rumbling. Just as a side note to our viewers, there is an amazing series that the Toronto Star did on autism called the Autism Project that I would recommend that anyone reads. But what's interesting about this is the article is based on a report by Kevin Stoddart, of the director of Toronto's Red Path Centre, and the headline says it all. The headline says, "Groundbreaking Adult Autism Survey Reveals Mountain of Unmet Needs." They're talking about children that may have autism that then grow up, and when they become adults, they face things like what it says in this article is social isolation, unemployment. This kind of reporting, this kind of research has actually even prompted the Ontario's Auditor General to do a review of how autism is addressed in this province. So my question to both of you, maybe perhaps I'll start off with you, is I know that you're working with children right now. You really understand that space. What do you think is going to happen, or how do you think we can address the needs of these children when they become adults?
So like I mentioned before, our demographic is very wide. So we have clients as young as 2 and as old as 31. So we have to be smart about it. We're not going to reject a family because of a certain age group. They still have the same troubles as someone who might be 2 years old. So what we've created is a team project. And team project is basically to train to employ adolescent minds. So we're trying to get our exit strategy within our organization. So the plan is to basically get the adults jobs. That's our ultimate goal. It's obviously very difficult because we have maybe a cultural or social shift where people are not so aware about autism, and that's where the problem lies, because people may have difficulty hiring someone with autism because they may not know, some of the challenges, or empathetically saying, that they don't understand. So
when you say that there isn't that awareness, you're talking about people on the outside who may not have dealt with anyone with autism, not being aware of, okay.
Right, so I'm talking business owners, I'm talking about corporations, I'm talking about people who are have the power to basically employ people. And when we employ, we can't necessarily say, okay, because you have autism, you can't come and work with us. There's a lot of advantages of being autistic when it comes to work. Detail orientation, for example, is unbelievable. We have people who are very committed, very rigid on schedules. You'll never have someone with autism who's going to be late because they're so scheduled when it comes to their routines. So they're great employers, and we just have to get that word out there, and that's something that we're desperately trying to work on right now. So what we're doing is creating two major projects. So the team project, like I mentioned, and then we have the social skills for adults as well within our program. And this works on basic computer skills, basic communication skills. The problem is when you go into workplace, it's maybe not the actual task that's being asked, it's maybe being part of the team. Understanding the social cues, understanding what's happening within the
So
work
they might not have an
environment.
issue with what they're being given specifically, but how to function in that
Right,
environment.
right.
Yeah.
So the theory now that may be bouncing back and forth is like you may have a child who may understand math equations or understanding body parts or what have you, but once you go into the real community, like crossing a street, for example, it's very challenging. Like, what are the rules within the road? What are the rules when you go into a coffee shop? What are the rules when you do daily things? And that's what we're trying to achieve right now. So the team project takes care of that vocational placement, but also the social aspect. So we take our group out once a month within the community. The last time we went to the Science Center, we're hoping to plan a trip to the ROM or going bowling, but our plan is to build relationships and build on that social cues and understanding conversation and what have you.
And what ages are we talking about here? Or what age is the cutoff for starting?
I think within funding within the province at 21, you
Okay.
see a huge depletion in funding for any type of service, whether it's ABA, speech, and what have you. And I think a lot of families feel isolated. They feel like, I've had these services, I've had the support, and all of a sudden there's absolutely nothing. And I went to a convention a couple of months ago, and the doctor there was saying that in total, the amount of studies on adults with autism is 22. 22 articles, that is it.
That's really nothing.
It's
Okay.
nothing. So there
Okay.
isn't much research into adults with autism either. And I think when we work with adults with autism, we're kind of left, like, what are the strategies? Like, do we still apply the same strategies when you have someone who's 2? And we're seeing some of the challenges now, but I think we're doing a great job accommodating, their age group. So we're taking them out, working on functional skills at home, such as making a sandwich, making them more independent. That's our goal right now. But it's innovative. I think we're trying to really cater to, again, not saying no because of a certain age, right?
So talk to me. I mean, I don't know if you'd like to jump in and add to that.
Well, I mean, the biggest issue we face with a lot of parents nowadays is when they come in and they have a child who's 21, 22. What's the next option? And a lot of them haven't reached the skill level that we need to employ. So that's where
Because
the
they haven't had perhaps like therapy from when
Right,
they were
exactly.
Right.
4 or whatever the case may be.
Exactly. And then
Okay.
the other big issue is then they have some behaviors that they can't stay at home. So what's the next step for them? Some of them try to look for group homes, but the wait list for group homes is unbelievable. It
What are
can
we-
be, we're looking at minimum a year to 2, minimum, right? Depending also on the severity, right? Now, with our team project, what happens is now parents have this avenue out. They're not left alone. They're not isolated. So that they can come in and now feel, okay, you know what? There's a future for my child. And a lot of parents will ask us this question. It's very sad. They'll ask, what's going to happen to my child once I pass away, right? And for a lot of us at the beginning, when we first started, we had no answer. We really had no answer. We did not know what to tell them.
And you've been getting that quite.
We get that a lot,
Share, yeah.
and we get that we get that a lot, and we even get families now moving from different countries, moving from different provinces to Ontario to get access to us, right? So that they can get an opportunity, somehow get employment, somehow join our team in adults social skills group. And when you think about that kind of story, it's sad. It's sad that we're living in such a developed country and that they're left alone. There's very little for them to find. And that's why I think for people that want to sponsor us, that's one thing. But there's other ways they can help us out as an organization. There's a lot of entrepreneurs out there. And if you have a job, for example, just filing things, shelving things, right? We have kids that would do that. And they'd be happy doing that. That's the difference. There's some people that would be bored doing this, but these kids would love doing that. It gives them something to do, and their parents would feel proud, right? They can make that change. For anyone that's out there that has any kind of job opportunity like that, give us a call. Email us at our website.
Interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, that's given us a tremendous amount of insight into that. I think what we're going to do is let's take a break now, because I think I want to shift the discussion and sort of talk about just the issue of rising incidences of autism. So stay with us. These two gentlemen will stay with us as well. We're going to make them because we have more questions for you. You're watching Crossroads on TVI with Manjula Salvaraja. Welcome back to Crossroads on TVI. We're speaking about autism and the South Asian Autism Awareness Center with Niran Cooney and Dr. Shivajan Sivavalan. Okay, so let's get to the nitty-gritty here. And I think I had already prepared you for this question, because I said this is something I'm even curious about. It's the idea that I'm going to read off the actual stat here, because I think our viewers may be interested in it. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reports that the rates of children displaying signs of autism have nearly doubled in the last decade. I think it used to be around 1 out of 300. Now it's close to 1 out of 88 children that are diagnosed with autism. So my question for you is, do you think it's a case of there being increased instances of autism, or just more doctors going, oh, I think this is autism?
It's a huge debate. I think we still have a hard time determining why the rates are going up. But for the most part, what I'm seeing socially and culturally is that there's more exposure to mental health issues. So if you turn on the TV, go to certain commercials, they're talking about anxiety, they're talking about depression, they're talking about different struggles you might have. People are now more aware of like ADD and ADHD and what autism is. So I think parents are aware, siblings are aware. So whenever their child may act, or their brother or sister may act a bit differently, or may not quite understand what's being said to them, then I think they get worried, and I think at that point they're more comfortable saying, you know what, my child or my brother, my sister needs help, and that's what we're seeing now within our organization. The volunteers that work with us, actually, a couple of them have approached me and said, I think my cousin may have something, I think my brother may have something, can you come in and just talk to the family? And I've done that on numerous occasions, right? And I think a culturally sensitive organization like us and other organizations out there are trying their best to make sure that everyone understands that if you have a disability, doesn't mean that you're isolated. There is help. And I think because of that, parents are coming more out and saying, I think I may need some support here. And that's why you might see an increase in rate. But Shiv, would you?
Yeah, let me add to that. In the past, the definition for autism was much broader, right? Recently, we've redefined that definition. It's a bit more narrow. And so you see more and more people are getting diagnosed, right? But at the same time, there's less of that diagnosis of learning disabilities and so on. So what we're believing is, in the past, a lot of kids that had autism were diagnosed differently and pushed into a different category. And
but
now
they were in some category,
yeah,
okay.
And now with this, I guess, a more defined definition, now they're getting recategorized as, okay, kids with autism, and hence we're seeing that increase. But still, the truth is, research has shown that only 2/3 of that increase is explained due to that increased awareness and the better diagnosis and screening tools, but still that 1/3 can't be explained.
So there is a chance that there could actually be
Yes.
an increased rate of instances of autism.
Exactly.
There is a possibility. Yeah.
There is okay. So, does this change, and perhaps I'll take this question to you, because we're talking about this issue when it comes to the South Asian community.
Yeah.
You're a physician, you're out there in the community talking to people, and you volunteered at SAC for a while. Tell me about sort of the attitudes, actions of family members around this issue.
I would say the biggest concern, there's a lot of concerns, right? The biggest concern or biggest issue is the lack of awareness. A lot of people, when you mention the word autism to a lot of families, or they hear about it, a lot of families don't know what it is. If you look at a lot of languages, there's no direct word or direct translation for the word autism.
Actually, is there a word for autism in Tamil or any? No,
Not
I
that I
don't.
know
I
of.
don't
We've
think
heard,
so.
yeah, we've just heard little different sayings, more derogatory, but nothing that's actually an official and categorizes what the kids suffer from or have. So major issues is a lot of times families will start noticing delays. Their child isn't speaking at 2 years of age, or there's a few behaviors. And what first source of information they'll go to is their parents or close family members. And a lot of times they're met with, well, you know what, it's okay. He's just a bit slow. Don't worry, he'll grow out of it. It's just a phase. That's the typical answer. So they wait. When they finally do go see their family doctor or physician, and then they might at that point get the diagnosis, oh, your child might have autism, that brings about a lot of fear, right? And typically what happens is families go home and then there's either self-blame or they start blaming each other. We see now an increasing number of couples separating because one or the other blames each other for their child having autism.
Okay.
And
it's also, in some cases, very difficult to kind of
Exactly.
handle the child
yeah.
as well. So that's an extra, I would imagine, extra stress on a marriage.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing is, at that point, they don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. There might be language barriers that play a huge role. And then there's cultural and societal issues, right? They're fearful that if they go and get therapy or come out and express themselves or share their stories, other people are going to judge them. Our community is going to suddenly sit there and go, well, is this a genetic thing? And did you do something to cause your child? Which none of this is, there's no validity to any of these statements, right? So this makes them more fearful and delays them getting early intervention, which is extremely key, right? A lot of times also, doctors will give them suggestions and be like, oh, you should try this center, or you should try applying for this grant and so on, and parents don't understand, or parents are like, you know what, I'm not going to try this, but I'm going to try some alternative route. We see a lot of families, what I call look for religious miracles. They'll start going to different churches, different mosques, different temples, and there's nothing wrong with that. But again, that delays them coming in for treatment, right? So there's a lot of obstacles. And then the biggest obstacle is the financial constraint. A lot of families want to get their kids treated. They want to get their children into some therapy. And like I mentioned before, that $60,000 number is huge for families, and they just can't. Right? So that's why we decided when we opened up SAC, we wanted to make sure parents have access regardless of their financial situation. So we do everything for free. Everything is.
It's interesting because the awareness becomes just as important then as the actual service that you offer.
Exactly.
Because once you do the awareness, at least they may seek, even if it's not from your organization, seek,
Right.
So do you think those attitudes are changing? I mean, you guys have been at it for a couple of years now. Within the South Asian community, do you think that's changing?
I think the volunteer base is an amazing project. What I'm seeing with the volunteers is so much determination and grit, and they're coming every single week to work with the child that they were assigned to. And it's amazing. They work full-time jobs and they still come to our organization, and the parents rely for them to be there, and the volunteers show up. And when we have trainings, they're there. They want to better themselves so that they can work with the children.
Actually, this is interesting. Talk to me about what a volunteer does and how much experience they need.
No experience necessary. I think, again, the passion is the biggest thing. Just going all out for this community. And it's truly amazing to see what these volunteers have done. So we have people who basically work with the children one-to-one, and they're trained by me and speech therapists as well. Just to execute the programs that we've specified for the child to help them improve. And having said that, with the volunteers, I truly believe that our next generation will be a lot more aware about autism, and I feel safer about it, because when they grow up, I think they'll be more accommodating for people with autism and any type of disability. And I think, when they come and they start working with the kids, there's that initial shock about, some of the behaviors or what have you, but I've seen volunteers become very hard and become very, effective teachers. And then we're continuing to make sure that they become better through our training. So there is a shift. There is a slight shift, and I think our biggest goal now is to get businesses involved and corporations to also accept that difference with people with autism. So that they don't feel isolated, they feel like they're a part of something. Right?
It's interesting because I just realized, you are, if I use the term correctly, you are an ABA therapist?
I'm an ABA therapist.
So this is one of the ways that you said through your volunteers that you leverage that sort of one person into multiple people who can do the work.
Right.
And in some way make it more affordable for the families
Right.
and for your organizations.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but I think it's a great plan because our mandate is to help as many people as we possibly can. And when you look at money and how we don't have the money, one of my challenges is basically to execute these programs with literally no budget. We have a lack of materials when it comes to other organizations and what they have. But slowly the money is coming in to help us improve the quality of services that we can provide the children. But for the past years, my biggest challenge was being able to work with pretty much limited amount of materials. And somehow we pulled through, and I honestly believe we pulled through because of just the passion that we were willing to sit down in one room and say, okay, let's just try and figure this out. How can we help out these kids?
That's a remarkable story. I think
Yeah.
we're going to comment about that at the end.
Now, I just wanted to add one. I mean, you talked about that shift, and the volunteers are the best example of our shift. We now, when we first had volunteers coming in and learning about autism, and then they spread it around in the community. Now we have volunteers that actually call us and tell us, you know what, I think one of my family members has a child with autism. Can you have them checked up? So now they become our almost like screening tools, right? They're going out in the community. They're telling people it's okay. There's help for you. It's not the end of the world, right? And that's something that's invaluable. We can't put a price on that.
Well, you can't have that many voices. I
Exactly.
mean, that's amazing,
Yeah.
right? So let's talk about, you mentioned early intervention, and I
Yeah.
just want to come back to that for a minute. Early intervention, from the little that I understand, is basically trying to get the therapies and things that you talk about early on in that child's life. So if that were to happen, you have to recognize the signs. What are some of the signs that parents that are watching could look out for?
Well, some of the signs that you can easily look out for now are, they're split into three groups, right? There's a lack of social interaction, right? So you notice that your child isn't interacting with other kids as well. It almost seems like the child's off in his or her little world, right? The lack of eye contact. They cannot sustain eye contact with you for more than 2 seconds, right? Then you look at language delay. Is your child saying about 20 words before the age of 2? Or is your child even babbling by the age of 1? Those little things should start triggering, okay, you know what, maybe my child is slightly behind in some of these things and maybe I should get it assessed. The third common thing is the repetitive behaviors or lack of imaginative play. You'll see sometimes children flapping their hands or spinning or twisting or doing complex body movements, right? These are all early signs that you can.
And when they do that, you mean when they do that sort of repeatedly?
Yes,
Right.
continuously, right? So what we tell parents is, a lot in our community, this whole idea of what I call the well baby check, right? Is you typically go and take in your child at 2, 4, 6 months and so on. Even if your child is completely healthy, to get their immunizations and to make sure that they're fine. The key checkup to go for is their 18-month checkup. Because most family doctors, if not all, in Ontario will do what they call a screening assessment for autism at that point. That will involve either 1 or 2 separate screening tools where they do a survey. And it's just a few questions that they ask parents and they check the developmental milestones of that child. And they make an assessment for if they're concerned that that child is, and then they'll refer them off to a specialist to have a full checkup. But a lot of families in our community miss that 18-month checkup.
Now, when you go in, do you have to ask for that at the 18-month checkup?
Typically you can. Most doctors should do it.
Do it, okay.
Right?
Or you can ask for it.
You can ask for it. Either way is fine.
And sorry, I interrupted you. I got caught on that. So you're saying there are families within our community that miss that.
Miss that a lot, right? And now what they're doing, even in the States, is they're adding a secondary 24-month checkup and a 30-month checkup for kids that are missed at 18 months, right? And we're trying to implement that now in Ontario as well. But right now, even if they miss the 18-month checkup, still go in. Even if you check your child is completely healthy, there's no harm in getting your child checked out around that 2-year point, because there's this optimal age between 2 and 6 where if they receive ABA/IBI, which is more intensive behavioral therapy, the rate of improvement or hitting their milestones sooner increases exponentially.
Between 2 and 6.
Between 2 and 6. It doesn't mean that after 6 there's no hope. It just means that optimal window is not there, but there's still benefits for getting therapy. That's why we say this whole early intervention. We want them in as soon as possible, right? The more you delay, the slower the improvements are seen.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, I was under the impression that this 18 months is actually news to me. I was under the impression that you needed to wait till they were 4 before you could assess.
And that used to be the case back then.
Okay.
Now there's so much research going into screening tools.
Okay.
I know some pediatricians, right, that can actually screen and pick up children with autism as early as 6 months, right? And studies now are showing that prior to 6 months, it's very difficult because most of them develop very normally at that point. Maybe the earliest sign you might pick up is a slightly enlarged head circumference, but that's also just in a quarter of that of children with autism. But it is getting that adequate follow-up, right? Showing up at your doctors just for one appointment to check your kid at 1 year and 2 years is not enough. You need to be going in consistently, right? And that's the biggest thing, because if we notice a small change, we can follow it. Maybe your child catches up at the next next appointment, right? Maybe he doesn't. But as long as there's follow-up, that's the key.
So, I mean, talk to me, and you have the last question of the day. So, early intervention, I mean, how do you guys facilitate that? What happens if a parent with, let's say a 3-year-old, or someone who's, 2 years comes in, a child that's 2 years comes in, what happens?
So basically, we demonstrate what needs to be done with that child. So whether it's communication, or if it's fine motor skills, or if it's being able to, play. I think we sometimes underestimate how important play is for young children. The benefit of play for young children is that whenever we as adults have problems, we kind of imagine solutions in our heads that can help us execute the actions to make sure that we solve the problem. So with play, that's the same thing for a child. You're exercising different ways of solving a problem, and usually the plot of play is that there's a huge crisis and there's a hero that comes and saves the day. So it's solving a problem. So when you have a child with autism who's always fixated on the same thing, not being able to broaden their horizons when playing with a toy or playing with another student, another child, that makes it very difficult for the social interaction and also trying to solve a problem, right? So we would sit down with the child and make sure that, okay, if they have the play skills or not. And if they don't, there's maybe some ways we can teach them how to play. If they can't socially interact with their parent, we need to somehow make the parent understand and make the child understand how the best way to communicate would be. So someone who's nonverbal, we would teach them the PEC system, which is basically using pictures to communicate the child's needs and wants. Being able to go to the bathroom, being able to get some food or water. I can't even imagine how it is, not being able to express my needs and my wants. So as a child, it could be very, very frustrating. So when you see that stress within the family dynamic, I think our goal is to establish what is the most important thing, whether or not they're able to communicate, and if not, let's work on that communication. If they can't play, let's work on play. If they can't identify numbers or letters, let's get them to that point where they're somewhat close to their peers. They may not be exactly there, but at least we're giving them that little push to make sure that they're getting closer. So.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, as always, to have you guys on.
Thank you.
And let's see what happens. I mean, if something comes out of this in the 1 year or 2 year, the Auditor General, does this review. If there's something that comes out of that, we'd love to have you back on to talk about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to take a break now. Stay with us. We're going to talk about dreams of space when we get back. You're watching Crossroads on TVI. Welcome back to Crossroads on TVI. 22-year-old Kabilan Thurayraja is in his final year of aerospace engineering at Ryerson University, and he has huge plans. He's currently in the running in an astronaut competition that could see him, I know you're going to hear me and not believe this, but that could actually see him go into space. Kabilan, I checked today, and you're actually in 3rd place out of hundreds of contestants.
Exactly.
So congratulations and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
My pleasure. So, I mean, I'm very excited about this, and I'm sure all of those people that are sort of space geeks and anyone else is interested as well. How did you hear about this contest?
Well, I was just watching some YouTube videos, and I follow this person on YouTube that follows like certain events, and anything interesting. And he mentioned this contest that Axe and this other company called Lynx were having, and I just looked up the contest and I was kind of debating if I should enter it. You know, it was kind of daunting. I was competing with thousands of people.
Yeah.
But a friend convinced me one day to just enter it. So later that evening, I just entered and just asked all my friends for support, and it just blew up.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
in third place. So what happens if you get to the lead?
So basically, this competition encompasses 60 countries. But in Canada, the top 2 people with the most number of votes, they actually get to go to Orlando, Florida. From there, you'll get put into training with astronaut training and fighter jet training and military
That's
training.
space camp is what I've heard. Yeah.
So you get spun in a centrifuge, which simulates forces up to 6 Gs. So this is basically to simulate how it is to go on a rocket, basically. And from there, they pick the best Canadian and they get flown to space. Yeah.
Really?
Exactly.
Tell me about the flying to space bit. I'm trying to.
Okay.
So you actually do go into the atmosphere.
Oh, you're above like 103 kilometers, and it's a suborbit flight. So you're not really going straight into orbit like other professional astronauts, but you do actually see the curvature of space, and it's just amazing.
You know what's interesting?
Yeah.
Actually, the SAC people who are in here mentioned it in between. They said that both of us would probably have to do some research
Yeah.
on this, but I don't think there have been other South Asians in space.
There was one female astronaut. She was of Indian descent, but I don't think of anyone from the Tamil
She was the
community.
one on the Challenger, maybe? No.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
yeah. But I don't think anyone from the. Okay,
Yeah.
well, let's help you make a first
hopefully.
then. Great. So, how do people vote for you?
I made a page on Facebook called My Race to Space. If you just check that up on Facebook, on that page there's everything that you need to know. Information about how to vote, any updates I may be having, and any further information. I'll just post it on there.
And what's the experience in the competition, like being a part of this, been like? Because, I mean, it's perhaps changed certain aspects of your life, right?
It's overwhelming. Like, I didn't know I would get this much support. Like, it's just like really the kindness of strangers, you know, like people that don't even know, they're posting it on their Facebook saying, vote for this person, help his dreams come true. And it's just overwhelming. Like, I wouldn't expect anyone to do this for me. And people from all over around the world are voting for me, and it's awesome.
So how does, I know that your mom, Ms. Raja, brought you in. I saw her in the foyer. How is she taking, like, how's your family taking all this?
At first, my mom, like, she just blew it off. She's like, oh, it's whatever, right? And then as soon as she saw the votes coming in, I kept pointing at the standings. Look, I'm 12, I'm 5th, I'm 3rd now. She got scared. She's like, you're actually going to go to space? I'm like, I'm hoping for that. And she was scared. And then, like, she just accepted it. And now she actually goes out to, like, Tamil grocery stores, and she'll, like, hand out my links and everything, and it's amazing.
Typical Tamil mother.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is going to be a huge, I mean, even just the physical things that you have to go through if you do have to go into space. So tell me, how did your interest in space and sort of aerospace engineering, where did that come from? What age did this start in you?
I guess it really started when I was 10 years old. I just had a thought of how it would be to actually go into space and see the stars from that point of view and see Earth from that point of view. I thought it was really cool. But I was kind of turned off from the fact because I would have to leave Earth, and it was just all this fear that I had. But I guess it was really ingrained in my mind because in high school, as I was taking all these science courses, it just really hit me that, you know, this is what you have to do. Like, you were born to do it. Like, it just never left me. I was really stubborn about it. And I took the courses I needed to get into the proper engineering course in university, and yeah, here I am.
And tell us what you study in aerospace engineering, because I'm not familiar with and what do people who study aerospace engineering do, because it's not just becoming an astronaut.
Yeah, of course.
It's a really huge field.
Of course, it's a branch of mechanical engineering that focuses on aircrafts and spacecrafts. Most of the people that actually do aerospace engineering, at Ryerson University, they actually work for Bombardier Aerospace. They work on all their aircrafts and just like different aspects. They can also work for other companies as well, like car companies, power plants, you name it. They work for it, yeah.
So it's a 4-year program?
Yeah, it's a 4-year program, yeah.
And I'm trying to think, I mean, is everyone in the contest, are they aerospace?
No, actually anyone could enter, because it's open to all residents above
Okay.
legal age.
And do you have physical constraints or anything like that? Like you have to have 20/20 vision or anything like that?
Yeah, that's what they'll assess at the actual space camp in themselves.
Okay.
There's actually a medical exam they go through on top of your physical fit test and a mental fit test. So they basically take really fit people to go to space, basically. Yeah.
Obviously, yeah. I mean, that's something I think people don't know about
exactly,
astronauts.
yeah.
So talk to us about what happens at the space camp. Because, I mean, there is a chance now. You're one spot away from making it.
Yeah.
So you must have researched it.
Yeah.
Tell us what happens once you get there.
So once I get to space camp, like I mentioned earlier, you would have to go through some training, which it's 5 days in December. So what you have to do is, like I said, go through a centrifuge training. You're in a fighter jet, so you get to fly in a fighter
Explain
jet.
a centrifuge training,
So,
because I think this is intriguing. I had someone explain it to me, so go
Okay,
ahead.
so I'm not sure if you've seen this on TV, but it's something that spins you around in a circle, and it simulates forces on your body up to 6G, 6 times Earth's gravitational forces. And that's just to get them to see if you can actually handle the acceleration caused by rockets. Because most people, they would pass out because the blood will actually leave their heads and go straight to their legs. So they teach you like breathing techniques to actually keep the blood flowing and like to squeeze your legs to actually keep the blood in your head so you don't like pass out.
So you're telling me when astronauts take off, I've heard this before, that the most difficult part is actually the ascent,
Yeah.
as opposed to just when you get there.
Yeah, it's just like taking off in an aircraft when you're flying to different countries. You actually feel the thrust on your body when it's taking off. This is just going to be like way beyond that.
Way beyond that,
Yeah.
yeah. And then what happens next?
So you're in a suborbit flight, so you're weightless, and like you have no gravity, minimal gravity acting on you, and you get to see Earth. And I believe it lasts 1 hour, and after that you actually re-enter, and you're good to go.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea how far away you are from second or first place, or are you given visibility into that?
They actually gave visibility before, but they took it down for a legal issue.
Okay.
Safe to say probably like 1,000 volts maybe, or
Okay.
maybe less than that, hopefully.
And when does the contest the competition, I should call it that, wrap up?
August 31st.
August
So I have
31st.
some time, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, folks, you heard it here. Kabul and Raja, the CrossRoads team would love to see you in space, because we are proud of the fact that we already have Commander Hatfield out in space. We have a Canadian in space right now. He's
Yes.
doing a phenomenal job getting people interested in space. So when you get up there, because we're hoping you do, will you come back on the show to tell us about it?
Of course.
Send us pictures,
Yeah,
right?
of course, of
Okay.
course.
Okay, you guys, CrossRoads viewers, please do us a favor. Please vote for this gentleman. We'd love to see him in space. And I just want to share my final thoughts for today. We at CrossRoads believe that organizations like the South Asian Autism Awareness Center do so much for the community. Not only do they support families impacted by autism, but they are nurturing the idea of compassion for your neighbors, and also nurturing a young volunteer base who may go on to start organizations that address other needs in the community. The team here at CrossRoads salutes their tenacity and dedication and hope you support them. Thank you all for joining us. You've been watching CrossRoads on TVI with Manjula Salvaraja.
தமிழரின் பிம்பம் உங்கள் டிவி.